If you've spent much time with us here at the Creek, you know we have a big question, a question that we ask over and over again. What did the church look like in 2019 and how is it different in 2020? We don't ask this question so we can track historical trends. We ask this question because it keeps us focused on what we're really about here at the Creek. What's church going to look like in 2022, in 2023, in 2024? Hey everyone, welcome to the Creek. My name is Jared Miller and I'm the ministry lead here. Since coming to Calgary, 2019 was the first year that I got to really dig into the practice of ministry south of Fish Creek. And with my team, we put together a slate of experiments, some 50 experiments in social ministry of different kind. And what we found at the end of it was that social ministry is just harder than we thought it was going to be. I thought it harder than even we thought we could imagine it was going to be. And so as we reflected on all of our failure, we tried to focus on what we thought might be our bright spots, the things that we did really well. And we found two things shone brightest of all. One was our experience developing as a team, and two, our time worshiping in a house church experiment. It was as we were trying to figure out how do we build on the foundation of those bright spots that COVID hit and set us all back to square zero. Now, I don't need to reiterate for you what I've already said on this channel a dozen times about our theology of space and online as a place rather than a tool. But what COVID actually did for us was force us to be honest about what it would mean to be church without a space, without a building, without a property. See, we didn't have the same functional challenges that other churches did. We didn't need to adapt and pivot in the same way. The challenge in front of us was not necessarily how are we going to find a way to maintain our space, but how are we going to reimagine what church can be for 2022, 2023, 2024, and 2025. The Creek is church seeking to embrace 2022. Rather than a one-size-fits-all approach that characterizes most churches, the Creek exists as a diverse, dispersed worship gathering, worshiping in different times, in different places, in different styles, spread across the great city of Calgary. We call this diverse collection of communities AfterWords, who meet bi-weekly for worship, fellowship, discussion of content, and prayerful discernment about how God is seeking to use us in our corner of the city in the name of Jesus. So what does it mean for us to be the church embracing 2022? In 1897, Francis Church was an editor at the New York Sun newspaper who hastily wrote a quick letter to a little girl's question asking whether or not there was a Santa Claus, and inadvertently put his finger on the pulse of society 123 years later with an almost surgical precision. Your friends, he wrote, have been affected by the skepticism of a skeptical age. If 1897 was a skeptical age, how much more 123 years later is the world that we inhabit? Today, nearly 1 in 5 Canadians identifies as having no religious affiliation. In a world where 3,000 years ago, the psalmist could write, "The fool says in his heart there is no God." Today, that statement not only makes sense to a large and growing number of Canadians, but has become, in essence, our kind of de facto public policy. The rise of a secular age is a phenomenon experienced by those of us who've been formed in the waters of the global north, particularly prevalent among white Anglo-Saxon Protestants. Secularity, as it's come to be known, is a mix of 3 distinct breeds of secularism that have been part of our cultural mix for centuries. Secularism 1, for example, it was simply the observation that there was a world outside the doors of the church or the cathedral. It might sound counterintuitive, but religion is, at its core, an invented concept. The word secular itself is derived from the New Testament's word for culture. In fact, the Bible knows almost nothing of the idea that we consider religion. Almost all of the uses of the word religion come in the New Testament and are almost uniformly translated from the word deus daimones, which is the New Testament's word where we get demon, but is more accurately translated as superstition. The idea of religion in the first century knew nothing of something that we would choose or something that we could even actively participate in. Religion was simply the water in which we swam. Secularism 1 was followed by secularism 2. The belief that if there was a distinguishing line between what was inside the church and what was outside the church, that same distinction needed to be drawn between what was a part of the public sphere and what was private. For the sake of a civilized society, there had to be an agreed upon set of cultural norms. Things had to be okay or taboo. And so that which was secular, that which was cultural, became public, became shared among everyone. That which was sacred became personal and internal and was only to be discussed within the confines of the home. This, for what it's worth, is the secularism that we tend to think that we're fighting against today. Secularism 3 is the secularism that gives rise to secularity, though. It is not an abandonment of God in the public sphere, but an utter failure by those in the public sphere to feel the need to consider God at all. It is the secularism that gives rise to disenchanted ethics and disenchanted morality, to disenchanted habits and disenchanted rituals. What you see, taste, experience, and feel is the sum total of who you are. And to borrow from the great Canadian philosopher Charles Taylor, who is the mind behind understanding the phenomenon of secularity, to be truly secular is to see yourself living within a bubble or a buffer, as he calls it, that separates the you that you are from the you that experiences the world around you. Your soul is not divinely imbued within you from your Creator. It is a phenomenon that, whether or not we understand it, has its own empiric processes that have given rise to it. This is the world we live in. This is a secular age. This is 2022. In this disenchanted age, the malaise of modernity is real and endemic. Welcome is simply not enough for the church anymore. We need what Alan Hirsch, the great missiologist, has called a reformation, a reimagining of what church can be, so that the world of 2022 can be not only re-evangelized, but reformed. And this, I believe, is what the church is for. This is what the church is good at, and what the church has been good at from the beginning. It's what the great theologian of the church, Augustine of Hippo, said the church's job was to be. In Latin, he wrote it was Ecclesia Reformata Semper Reformanda Secundum Verbum Dei. The church is reformed and always reforming according to the Word of God. Easier said than done, though, right? The problem, as we've repeatedly identified it, for those of us at least within the stream of Christianity known as the Reformed tradition, of which I'm a part, is that we were formed in the historical period known as modernity, a time when productivity was our greatest value, when things were phrased as decently and in good order, when production and efficiency were the name of the game, and a time when summations of great thought were written, collected, collaborated, and published in tomes, where the great theological works of the day were summations of Christian thought known as the Institutes of the Christian Religion by John Calvin, which clocks in at a neat and tidy 230,000 words. But as secularity grew, the kind of certainty that has to undergird that work began to crumble under its weight. And as it collapsed, it gave rise to the birth of a new movement known as post-modernity or postmodernism, a complete and total rejection of certainty in every kind. So for the Creek to be the church embracing 2022, we had to focus on reforming in order to focus on re-evangelizing a postmodern, secular age. This the Creek does through the creation of diverse worship gatherings known as AfterWords. The idea of AfterWords is that by making church available to anyone, anywhere, at any time, the effort put into making church happen one time for everyone in one place can shift from the words that are said in that liturgical gathering to the desired outcome of those words, what happens after they're over. AfterWords does two things. It offloads the work of content creation designed to help people disciple their head, heart, and hands to a medium that can be accessed and at a time that is convenient for the consumption of that content, and two, actually makes the consumption of that content secondary to the worshipful act of gathering as a community for engagement, prayer, and Eucharist. AfterWords gatherings follow a predictable liturgical frame focused on three core values: formation, learning to be more like Jesus; mission, practicing being like Jesus; and multiplication, helping more people be more like Jesus. An AfterWords gathering might look something like this. It begins with the liturgy of the ordinary, where a gathering intentionally practices the act that has ostensibly drawn them together, whether it is small talk over coffee in a cafe, or the eating of a meal together in a restaurant, or simply having a glass of wine in someone's living room. Normalizing and naturalizing the act of gathering together as a worshiping community is central to how we do AfterWords. This leads into a time of centering prayer where the leader of the group invites and reminds the people gathered that gathering in an ordinary way is itself an extraordinary act, that God is present in them, which leads into a prayerful discussion of the content from the past 2 weeks, focusing on points that are either helpful or thought-provoking. Through this, they lead a process of discerning engagement with the material, where the leader helps the group to see how they are being prayerfully led into their corner of the city, when they then spend time praying for that corner of the city, giving thanks for what God is doing and bringing the prayers of their neighborhood and each other to the throne of grace with confidence. This is a natural point at which they would then break bread in the celebration of Eucharist, where bread is broken, where wine is poured, where the Lord's sacrifice is remembered before being dismissed into their community with a blessing. This is not a novel approach. Nothing about this is new. It is a process, in fact, lifted directly from the practice of the early church, who would gather in discrete times and places so as not to arouse too much of unwanted attention. Often, bishops in the early church would leave a book of bound material so that a group could meet in discrete times and places as was convenient for them, without having to sacrifice the proclamation of the good news of a resurrected Jesus Christ in that unbroken line of apostolic succession. The postmodern equivalent to this pre-modern approach is the Creeks app, which is available today in the App Store, where papyrus served a critical role in helping the pre-modern world to evangelize their community by disseminating ideas. The Creek app provides a postmodern papyrus where community can gather, where content can be consumed, shared, and made readily available, and where all of the material needed to find or connect to an AfterWords gathering in your neighborhood is available. As this process rolls out, we look so forward to engaging with you in this work, to seeing you at an AfterWords gathering, to sharing the good news of what the Creek is doing with you, and to soaking in the prayers of this great community of faith. We don't do this work of building the Creek alone. And so we thank you for watching this with us. If you have any questions, we invite you to reach out. My email is here on the screen. You can reach out to me anytime. Drop me a line on the back end of this channel, or hit me up on one of our social media channels. We would love to hear from you. We look forward to seeing you on the Creek app. We look forward to seeing you on the Creek social media. We look forward to seeing you back here again soon. For now, take care of yourselves and take care of each other, and we'll talk to you soon. All the best. Cheers.